I was halfway through sanding the third cabinet door of the morning when my phone buzzed with an email that made my blood run cold. The subject line read, "Notice of violation, immediate cease and desist required." My name is Ethan Daniels, and I had just spent the last 8 months converting my detached garage into a fully licensed woodworking workshop here in Mesa, Arizona. Every permit was filed, every inspection passed, every box checked, or so I thought. The email was from Brenda Hutchinson, president of the Saguaro Ridge Homeowners Association. I wiped the sawdust off my hands and read through the complaints, feeling my jaw tighten with each sentence. According to Brenda, I was operating an illegal commercial business in a residential zone, creating excessive noise pollution, violating parking regulations, generating too much traffic, and somehow managing to decrease property values for the entire neighborhood. The kicker was at the bottom. I had 72 hours to shut down operations completely or face daily fines starting at $500. I stepped outside my workshop and looked around my property. The sun was beating down on the Arizona desert landscape, and everything looked perfectly normal. My house was a modest ranch-style home on a half-acre lot, and the workshop was a detached structure that had originally been a 3-car garage. I had bought this property specifically because the lot was zoned for mixed use, which meant I could legally run a small business from home as long as I followed the proper procedures. And I had followed them religiously. My phone rang immediately after I finished reading the email. It was my wife, Wendy Nelson Daniels, calling from her dental office downtown. "Did you see that insane email?" she asked without preamble. "Just read it. How did you get copied on it?" She sent it to both of us. "Ethan, this is completely ridiculous. We have every single permit." Remember how paranoid we were about doing everything by the book? "I remember spending 3 months just navigating the bureaucracy," I said, walking back into the workshop. "I have a binder 2 inches thick with every form, every approval, every inspection report. So what are we going to do?" "I am going to call the city and confirm everything is still valid. Then I am going to respond to Brenda and politely tell her to back off." Wendy sighed. "You know she is not going to make this easy. She has been looking for a reason to cause trouble ever since we didn't vote for her proposed landscaping rules last year." She was right about that. Brenda had taken it personally when several homeowners, including us, had voted against her plan to mandate specific desert plants and ban all grass lawns. The proposal would have cost each household thousands of dollars, and plenty of people thought it was government overreach. Brenda had stood up at that meeting, her face flushed red, and declared that some people just did not care about property values or community standards. After hanging up with Wendy, I called the Mesa City Planning Department. I was transferred 3 times before finally reaching someone in the Commercial Permits Division named Marcus. "Let me pull up your file," Marcus said, and I could hear typing in the background. "Okay, Ethan Daniels, 4782 Desert Canyon Drive. I have you right here. Your property is in a mixed-use zone, correct?" "That is correct." "And you applied for a home-based business permit for custom woodworking and furniture making, limited to 1 employee besides yourself, with operating hours restricted to 7 a.m. through 7 p.m. on weekdays." "Yes, exactly." "Is everything still valid?" "Let me check the inspection records." More typing. "You passed your initial safety inspection, your electrical inspection, your fire safety inspection, and your final occupancy inspection. All dated within the last 8 months. Everything shows as current and compliant." "Why are you asking?" I explained the situation with the HOA. Marcus listened quietly, then let out a long breath. "Mr. Daniels, I cannot give you legal advice, but I can tell you that your permits are completely valid and up to date. The city has no issues with your operation. If your HOA is claiming violations, they need to be specific about what rules you are actually breaking, and those rules cannot override city zoning laws. Can you send me something in writing confirming that? I can email you a permit verification letter within the hour. It will show that all your permits are active and in good standing. I thanked him and hung up feeling slightly better. At least I had the city on my side. I spent the next 30 minutes drafting a response to Brenda, keeping my tone professional but firm. I explained that all my permits were legal and valid, that my business complied with all city ordinances, and that I would be happy to provide documentation. I asked her to specify exactly which HOA rules she believed I was violating. Her response came back in less than 10 minutes. The HOA CC and Articus clearly state that no commercial activity is permitted on residential properties. Section 7, Paragraph 3. Your operation violates this provision regardless of city permits. The fines will commence in 72 hours unless you comply. I pulled out the copy of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that had come with our house purchase. I had read through them before buying, specifically looking for anything that might conflict with my workshop plans. Section 7, Paragraph 3 stated that no commercial activity that created excessive noise, traffic, or nuisance to neighbors was permitted. The key word was excessive. My workshop was well insulated. I had one client visit per week on average, and I had never received a single complaint from any actual neighbor. I called our real estate attorney, Rebecca Torres, who had handled our house closing. She agreed to review the situation and called me back that afternoon. Ethan, I have been through your HOA documents and your city permits. You are absolutely in the right here. The CC and Articus do not ban all commercial activity. They ban commercial activity that creates a nuisance. Since you have city approval and you are operating within the permitted parameters, the HOA does not have grounds to shut you down. So what happens when they try to fine me? You document everything. Keep records of your operating hours, your client visits, your noise levels, everything. If they do fine you, we will fight it, and we will almost certainly win. But I am going to draft a letter to send to the HOA board explaining the legal situation. Sometimes that is enough to make them back down. And if it is not enough, then we go to court and they end up paying your legal fees on top of everything else. Rebecca sent her letter that evening. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I arrived at my workshop at 7 a.m. sharp and found Brenda standing in my driveway with a clipboard and a camera. She was a woman in her late 50s with short blonde hair that was clearly overprocessed, wearing a visor and athletic wear, despite the fact that I had never seen her exercise once. She had the particular expression of someone who believed they were doing the Lord's work by making other people miserable. "You are already in violation," she announced, clicking a photo of my truck in the driveway. "Good morning, Brenda. Violation of what?" Commercial vehicle parked in a residential driveway. Section 12, Paragraph 8. I looked at my truck. It was a standard Ford F-250, the same truck I had owned for years. This is my personal vehicle. It has a ladder rack and your business name on the door. That makes it a commercial vehicle. It has a magnetic sign that I can remove. And even if it were a commercial vehicle, I am allowed to park one vehicle associated with a home-based business on my property. That is in the city ordinance. The HOA rules supersede city ordinances on matters of community standards. No, Brenda, they really do not. Did you receive the letter from my attorney? Her expression tightened. I received a letter from someone who clearly does not understand HOA law. The board met last night and voted unanimously to proceed with enforcement action. The board is you, your husband, and your sister-in-law. That is hardly unanimous consensus from the community. We were elected by the community. 47 people voted in that election, Brenda. There are 230 homes in this neighborhood. She clicked another photo, this time of my workshop door. The violations stand. You have 53 hours remaining. I watched her walk away, feeling my frustration build. This was not about rules or property values. This was about control and punishment. Brenda could not stand that someone in her neighborhood was doing something she had not personally approved. I went inside and called Rebecca again. She listened to my description of the confrontation and made a sound of annoyance. She is harassing you. Start documenting everything. Every interaction, every photo she takes, every email she sends. We are going to need it. For what? For a restraining order if necessary, and for the countersuit. You think it is going to go that far? Ethan, I have dealt with HOA disputes for 15 years. People like Brenda do not back down easily. She has decided you are her enemy, and she is going to push this as far as she can. The next 2 days were tense. I continued working in my workshop, fulfilling orders for custom furniture pieces. I was building a set of dining chairs for a client in Scottsdale, and the work required my full attention. But every time I heard a car slow down near my house, I tensed up, wondering if it was Brenda coming back to document more imaginary violations. On the third day, at exactly 72 hours after the initial email, I received another message. This one informed me that I was being fined $500 per day, effective immediately, until I ceased all commercial activity. The fine would be added to my HOA dues, and failure to pay would result in a lien being placed on my property. I forwarded the email to Rebecca, who called me within minutes. Okay, they have officially crossed the line. I am filing an injunction this afternoon to stop the fines. We are also going to demand an independent review of the HOA's actions. This is textbook overreach. How long will this take? The injunction hearing should be within 2 weeks. In the meantime, do not pay the fines, but keep doing everything by the book. Document your hours, your activities, everything. I agreed and went back to work. That afternoon, I had a client visit scheduled. The client was a woman named Patricia who had commissioned a custom bookshelf for her home office. She arrived right on time, and I showed her the progress on her piece. She was delighted with the work, and spent about 20 minutes discussing finish options and delivery details. As Patricia was leaving, Brenda appeared from somewhere and intercepted her in the driveway. I could not hear the conversation from inside my workshop, but I could see Brenda gesturing animatedly while Patricia looked increasingly uncomfortable. After a few minutes, Patricia hurried to her car and drove away. Brenda turned toward my workshop with a satisfied expression. My phone rang immediately. It was Patricia. Ethan, I am so sorry, but I need to cancel my order. My stomach dropped. What happened? Did Brenda say something to you? She told me that you are operating illegally and that your workshop has not been properly inspected. She said there have been multiple safety violations and that the city is about to shut you down. She said I could be liable if I take possession of furniture built in an illegal workshop. Patricia, none of that is true. I have every permit, every inspection has been passed. The HOA president is harassing me because of a personal grudge. I believe you, but I just cannot deal with this kind of drama. I am really sorry. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, feeling a wave of anger unlike anything I had experienced in years. Brenda had just cost me a $1,500 commission through pure lies and intimidation. I marched outside, but Brenda had already disappeared. I called Rebecca again and told her what happened. "That is tortious interference with business relations," Rebecca said immediately. "That is actionable. Did your client tell you exactly what Brenda said?" "She said Brenda told her the workshop was illegal and unsafe, and that she could be liable." "Okay, I need you to email your client and ask her to provide a written statement of what was said. Explain that you are taking legal action and that her statement will help. If she agrees, we have a very strong case not just against the HOA but against Brenda personally." I sent the email to Patricia, explaining the situation and asking for her help. To my relief, she responded within an hour with a detailed account of the conversation. Brenda had not just implied the workshop was problematic. She had outright stated that it was illegal and dangerous. Rebecca was thrilled when I forwarded her Patricia's statement. This changes everything. We are not just fighting an HOA overreach anymore. We are talking about defamation and intentional interference with your business. I am going to amend our filing. The next few days were consumed with legal preparations. Rebecca filed for an emergency injunction to stop the fines and also initiated a lawsuit against both the HOA and Brenda personally. The lawsuit claimed harassment, defamation, and tortious interference. We were asking for damages to cover my lost commission, my legal fees, and additional compensation for the stress and disruption to my business. During this time, I started hearing from neighbors. Apparently, Brenda had been going door to door, telling people about the illegal commercial operation in their neighborhood, and encouraging them to sign a petition demanding my workshop be shut down. Several neighbors called me directly to let me know they had refused to sign and thought Brenda was being ridiculous. One neighbor, an older man named Frank who lived 3 houses down, stopped by the workshop one evening. "I just wanted you to know that most of us think Brenda is out of control," he said. "She has been making everyone miserable for years with her constant rule enforcement. Last year, she tried to fine me because my garbage cans were visible from the street for 10 minutes after the truck came." 10 minutes. I appreciate you saying that, Frank. A bunch of us are talking about trying to recall the HOA board, but it is complicated. The CC and Articus make it really difficult to remove board members, but maybe this situation will be the push we need. Nobody wants to live in a neighborhood where the HOA president can just destroy your livelihood on a whim. That conversation gave me hope that this might lead to broader change. But first, I had to survive the legal battle. The injunction hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the Maricopa County Superior Court. Rebecca met me outside the courthouse, looking confident in a navy suit and carrying a thick file folder. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Nervous. What are our chances?" "Very good. We have all the documentation on our side. The HOA is going to have a hard time justifying their actions." Inside the courtroom, I saw Brenda sitting with a lawyer I did not recognize. She glared at me as I took my seat. The HOA's attorney was a middle-aged man named Preston Clark, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The judge, a woman named Judge Sandra Martinez, called the case and asked for opening statements. Rebecca went first, clearly and methodically laying out the facts. I had purchased property in a mixed-use zone, obtained all required permits, passed all inspections, and operated completely within legal parameters. The HOA had then attempted to shut down my legal business based on a misreading of their own CC and Articus, had imposed arbitrary fines without proper notice or hearing, and the HOA president had actively interfered with my business by lying to clients. Preston Clark stood up for his turn, and I could tell immediately that his heart was not in it. He argued that the HOA had the right to enforce community standards, and that home-based businesses created concerns about property values and neighborhood character. But when Judge Martinez asked him to cite specific evidence of problems caused by my workshop, he had nothing. No noise complaints, no traffic issues, no documentation of any actual disruption. "Mr. Clark," Judge Martinez said, "your client has alleged multiple violations, but I am not seeing any evidence. Do you have any testimony from neighbors who have been negatively impacted?" "Your Honor, the issue is not whether there have been complaints yet, but whether the business violates the CC and Articles. The CC and Articles prohibit commercial activity that creates a nuisance." "Where is the nuisance?" Preston hesitated. "The presence of a commercial operation in a residential area is inherently a nuisance. Except that the property is zoned for mixed use, the city has approved the business, and you have presented no evidence of any actual problems. Miss Torres, do you have anything to add?" Rebecca stood. "Yes, Your Honor. We also have evidence that Miss Hutchinson, the HOA president, deliberately interfered with my client's business by making false statements to a customer." She handed up Patricia's written statement. Judge Martinez read through it, her expression darkening. "Mr. Clark, is your client here today?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Miss Hutchinson, please stand." Brenda stood up, her face already red. "Did you tell a customer of Mr. Daniels that his workshop was operating illegally and had safety violations?" "I told her what the HOA had determined, Your Honor." "Did you have any factual basis for claiming safety violations?" "The workshop has not been inspected by the HOA." "Does the HOA have the authority to conduct safety inspections?" Brenda hesitated. "We have the authority to enforce our rules." "That is not what I asked. Do you have any expertise in building safety, electrical systems, or fire codes?" "No, Your Honor." "Did you contact the city to determine whether there were any actual safety violations?" "No, Your Honor." Judge Martinez set down the papers and looked at Brenda with obvious disapproval. "Miss Hutchinson, from what I can see, you have abused your position as HOA president to target a homeowner who is operating a completely legal business. You have imposed fines without justification, and you have made false statements that have harmed his business. This is exactly the kind of HOA overreach that gives homeowners associations a bad reputation." She turned to Preston. "Mr. Clark, I am granting the injunction. The HOA is prohibited from imposing any fines related to Mr. Daniels' workshop. Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to reimburse Mr. Daniels for any fines already collected, and to issue a written retraction of all violation notices. I am also referring this matter to the Arizona Department of Real Estate for potential violations of HOA management standards." Preston nodded, looking resigned. Brenda looked like she had been slapped. "We will reconvene in 30 days to discuss the broader lawsuit," Judge Martinez continued. "In the meantime, Miss Hutchinson, I strongly suggest you refrain from any further contact with Mr. Daniels or his customers. Is that clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," Brenda said, her voice barely above a whisper. We filed out of the courtroom, and Rebecca turned to me with a satisfied smile. "That went better than I expected. What happens now?" "Now we wait for them to comply with the judge's order. If they do not, we go back to court and things get even worse for them, and we continue with the lawsuit for damages." Over the next week, I received a formal letter from the HOA withdrawing all violation notices and reimbursing the fines they had attempted to collect. The letter was signed by Preston Clark, not Brenda. There was no apology, just a clinical statement that the previous notices were being rescinded. I thought that might be the end of it, but I should have known better. 2 weeks after the court hearing, I came home from a supply run to find that someone had spray-painted illegal business across my workshop door in bright red paint. I immediately called the police and filed a report. The responding officer, a young guy named Officer Ramirez, took photos and asked if I had any idea who might have done it. "I have a pretty good idea," I said, and explained the situation with the HOA. "You have any security cameras?" "No, but I am installing some today." "Good idea. File this report number with your insurance and keep us updated if you have any more problems." I called Rebecca and told her what happened. She was furious. "This is criminal vandalism. We need to add this to the lawsuit. Do you think it was Brenda?" "I do not have proof, but the timing is suspicious. Install cameras immediately. If she is escalating to property damage, we need to document everything." I spent the rest of the day cleaning the paint off my workshop door and installing a security camera system. I put cameras at every corner of my property, all feeding to a cloud storage system. The setup cost me almost $1,000, but it felt necessary. 3 days later, the cameras caught something. At 2 in the morning, a figure approached my workshop and appeared to be trying to pry open the door. The motion sensors triggered and the floodlights came on. The figure ran off, but not before the camera got a clear shot of her face. It was Brenda. I called the police immediately and showed Officer Ramirez the footage when he arrived. "That is pretty clear," he said. "Do you want to press charges?" "Absolutely." "Okay, we will bring her in for questioning." This is attempted burglary at minimum, possibly criminal trespassing and vandalism if we can connect her to the spray paint incident. Officer Ramirez left, and I called Rebecca with an update. She sounded almost excited. "This is exactly what we needed. She has completely torpedoed her own case. Any judge is going to look at this pattern of behavior and throw the book at her." The next morning, I learned from Frank that Brenda had been arrested. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Several neighbors stopped by to express their support and to tell me they had started recall proceedings for the HOA board. "We have enough signatures to trigger a special election," Frank said. "We are going to get rid of Brenda and her little crew, and we are going to elect board members who actually represent the community." The criminal case against Brenda moved faster than I expected. She was charged with attempted burglary, criminal trespassing, and criminal damage. She pled not guilty initially, but when the prosecutor showed her attorney the video footage, she changed her plea to guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my property. She was also required to resign from the HOA board immediately. The civil lawsuit proceeded in parallel. With Brenda's criminal conviction on record, the HOA's insurance company decided to settle rather than go to trial. They paid me $35,000 to cover my lost business, legal fees, and damages. Brenda was personally liable for an additional $10,000 that her insurance would not cover. The HOA board recall election happened 6 weeks after Brenda's arrest. The turnout was the highest the neighborhood had seen in a decade. Frank was elected as the new president, along with 2 other reasonable neighbors. Their first act was to formally apologize to me on behalf of the HOA and to establish new procedures for complaint investigations that required actual evidence before action could be taken. I finally felt like I could breathe again. My workshop was running smoothly, and I had actually gotten more business from the publicity around the case. Several articles had been written about the situation, framing it as a cautionary tale about HOA overreach, and multiple clients had reached out specifically because they wanted to support a small business owner who had stood up to bullying. One afternoon, about 3 months after everything settled down, Wendy and I were sitting on our back patio, watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in shades of orange and purple. "I still cannot believe how crazy that all got," Wendy said. "I know. When I got that first violation email, I never imagined it would end with criminal charges and a lawsuit. You think Brenda has learned anything? I doubt it. People like that rarely do, but at least she cannot hurt anyone else in this neighborhood. You ever see her around?" "Not once since the arrest. I heard she and her husband are thinking about moving. Good riddance." I reached over and took Wendy's hand. "You know what the weirdest part is? I am actually grateful it happened." "How can you be grateful for that nightmare?" "Because it showed me how strong our community can be when people stand up for what is right. Frank and the other neighbors who supported us. Patricia who gave us that statement. Even people I barely knew who reached out to say they were on our side. That means something. You are a better person than me. I am just glad it is over." "It is definitely over. And my workshop is thriving, the HOA is functional again, and Brenda is someone else's problem now." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky deepen from orange to purple to dark blue. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called out and another answered. The desert night was settling in, warm and peaceful. The next morning I was back in my workshop by 7 a.m., working on a custom dining table for a client in Phoenix. The wood was a beautiful piece of walnut, and I was hand planing the surface to bring out the grain. This was the work I loved, the reason I had gone through all the trouble to build this workshop in the first place. My phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from a reporter at the Arizona Republic, asking if I would be willing to be interviewed for a piece about HOA reform legislation being proposed in the state legislature. Apparently, my case had caught the attention of several lawmakers who wanted to introduce new regulations to prevent HOA abuse. I smiled and typed out a quick reply saying I would be happy to participate. If my experience could help other homeowners avoid the same kind of harassment, it would all have been worth it. The interview happened the following week. The reporter, a sharp woman named Lisa Chen, asked thoughtful questions about the timeline of events, the legal process, and what I thought needed to change. I told her that HOAs could serve a valuable purpose in maintaining neighborhoods, but they needed better oversight and accountability. Board members should not be able to act on personal grudges, and homeowners needed better recourse when boards overstepped their authority. The article ran 2 weeks later, and it was well-researched and balanced. It included quotes from me, from Rebecca, from Frank representing the new HOA board, and even from a state legislator who was sponsoring the reform bill. The proposed legislation would require HOAs to provide detailed evidence before imposing fines, establish a state-level appeals process for homeowners, and create penalties for board members who abuse their authority. I got calls from 3 other homeowners across Arizona who were dealing with similar situations. I spent time on the phone with each of them, sharing what I had learned and connecting them with Rebecca, who was becoming something of a specialist in HOA disputes. One of those homeowners was a man named Carlos in Tucson, who was being fined for parking his work van in his driveway. Another was a woman named Jennifer in Flagstaff, whose HOA was trying to ban her from running a virtual assistant business from her home office. The third was an older couple in Surprise who were being harassed because they had installed solar panels without HOA approval, even though state law protected their right to do so. Rebecca took on all 3 cases, and I testified as an expert witness in 2 of them, sharing my experience and explaining how I had navigated the permit process. All three cases settled in favor of the homeowners, and two of those HOAs ended up replacing their boards just like ours had. By the time summer rolled around, things had settled into a new normal. My workshop was busier than ever, with a waiting list of clients stretching into the fall. Wendy and I had started hosting monthly barbecues for the neighbors, and the sense of community in Saguaro Ridge was stronger than it had been in years. Frank turned out to be an excellent HOA president. He focused on actual community needs like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, rather than trying to micromanage everyone's property. Under his leadership, the HOA started a community garden, organized a summer concert series in the common area, and established a neighborhood watch program. Property values actually increased, not because of strict enforcement of arbitrary rules, but because people enjoyed living there. I ran into Brenda one time about 6 months after everything concluded. I was at the grocery store in Mesa, picking up supplies for one of our barbecues, when I saw her in the produce section. She saw me at the same moment, and her face went pale. She turned and walked quickly in the other direction without saying a word. I did not chase her down or try to confront her. There was nothing left to say. She had created her own consequences through her actions, and I had moved on. The HOA reform legislation passed the Arizona legislature that fall and was signed into law by the governor. It included most of the provisions that had been proposed, creating better protections for homeowners and accountability for HOA boards. Several news outlets covered the signing ceremony, and my case was mentioned as one of the catalysts for the change. Rebecca called me the day the bill was signed. "You did it, Ethan. You changed the law." "We did it," I corrected her. And all those other homeowners who came forward with their stories. "True, but you were willing to fight when a lot of people would have just shut down their business and moved on. That takes courage, or stubbornness. Sometimes they are the same thing." That evening, Wendy and I celebrated with a nice dinner at our favorite restaurant in downtown Mesa. We toasted to new beginnings, to justice, and to the simple pleasure of being able to work in peace. "What would you have done differently?" Wendy asked over dessert. I thought about it. Honestly, I would have installed those security cameras from the beginning. That footage was the key to everything. Anything else? Maybe I would have been more proactive about connecting with neighbors earlier. Building that coalition of support made all the difference. When it was just me against the HOA, I felt isolated. Once I realized how many people were on my side, everything changed. You think Brenda ever understood why what she did was wrong? I doubt it. She probably still thinks she was just enforcing the rules and that I was the troublemaker. Some people are so invested in being right that they cannot see the harm they are causing. Wendy raised her glass. To never becoming that person. I will drink to that. We clinked glasses and finished our celebration. The future felt bright and full of possibility. As months turned into a year, the whole ordeal faded into memory. I continued to build furniture, and my reputation grew. I hired an assistant, a recent graduate from a woodworking program at a community college, and we worked together to fulfill the increasing number of orders. The workshop that Brenda had tried so hard to shut down became one of the most successful small businesses in Mesa. The new HOA board under Frank's leadership became a model for other neighborhoods. They were featured in an HOA industry magazine as an example of how associations should operate, focusing on community building rather than enforcement. Several board members from other neighborhoods reached out to learn from their approach. I started teaching occasional woodworking classes in my workshop on weekends, sharing my skills with hobbyists and aspiring professionals. It became another revenue stream and another way to connect with the community. Some of my students were neighbors from Saguaro Ridge, and watching them discover the joy of working with wood reminded me why I had wanted to do this in the first place. One of my students was a teenager named Miguel, whose family lived 2 streets over. He had talent and passion, and I ended up mentoring him more intensively. He helped out in the workshop after school, learning advanced techniques and earning some money. Watching him develop his skills was incredibly rewarding. My parents were really worried when all that stuff was happening with the HOA, Miguel told me one afternoon while we were working on a joint project. They thought you might have to shut down and I would lose my chance to learn from you. I am glad it worked out. My dad said you were brave to fight back. He said a lot of people would have just given up. I did not really have a choice. This workshop is my dream. I was not going to let someone take it away just because they did not like me. Do you ever worry it could happen again? Like, what if someone else on the HOA decides they do not like what you are doing? I do not think so. The new board is reasonable, and the new laws make it much harder for HOAs to abuse their power. But even if something did happen, I know how to handle it now. I have the documentation, the connections, the experience. Nobody is going to catch me off guard again. Miguel nodded thoughtfully and went back to his sanding. I watched him work, feeling a sense of satisfaction that went beyond business success. This workshop had become more than just a place to build furniture. It was a place where knowledge was passed on, where community was built, where dreams were pursued. That summer, the neighborhood threw a block party to celebrate the first anniversary of the new HOA board. It was a massive event with food trucks, live music, and activities for kids. Frank asked me to say a few words during the opening ceremony. I stood up in front of a crowd of neighbors, feeling slightly self-conscious but mostly grateful. A year ago, I was not sure I would still be living in this neighborhood. I was facing thousands of dollars in fines and legal battles, all because I wanted to build furniture in my own workshop. But this community came together and showed me what neighbors are supposed to do. You supported me, you stood up for what was right, and you created change. This neighborhood is not defined by one person who abused their power. It is defined by all of you who refuse to let that abuse continue. Thank you for being the kind of neighbors everyone deserves. The applause was warm and genuine, and several people came up afterward to shake my hand or give me a hug. It felt like a true fresh start, a turning point for Saguaro Ridge. Later that evening, as the party was winding down, Frank pulled me aside. "I wanted to tell you something," he said. "The board voted unanimously to create an annual community award in your name. The Ethan Daniels Good Neighbor Award will go to someone who exemplifies standing up for what is right and contributing to the community. We want to make sure people remember what you went through and how you handled it." I was genuinely touched. "Frank, you did not have to do that. We wanted to. You set an example for all of us. When we face something difficult, we should handle it with integrity and persistence, just like you did. I just did what I had to do. That is exactly the point. You did not back down, you did not take shortcuts, and you did not give up. That is what we want to celebrate." The first Ethan Daniels Good Neighbor Award was given out the following spring at the annual HOA meeting. The recipient was a woman named Sharon who had organized a support network for elderly residents in the neighborhood, helping them with grocery shopping, yard work, and other tasks. It was exactly the kind of community-minded work that deserved recognition. As I watched Sharon accept the award, with her family cheering and the whole room applauding, I felt a profound sense of completion. What had started as a nightmare scenario had transformed into something positive and lasting. Brenda had tried to tear me down, but instead, she had inadvertently brought the community together and inspired real change. my business continued to thrive. I was featured in Phoenix Home and Garden magazine for a custom entertainment center I had built, and that led to a flood of new inquiries. I had to start turning down work because I simply could not keep up with demand. It was a good problem to have. Wendy's dental practice was also doing well, and we started talking about our future plans. We wanted to start a family, and the stability we had built made it feel like the right time. The workshop was established, the legal troubles were behind us, and we were part of a supportive community. On a quiet evening 2 years after that first violation notice, I was in my workshop putting the finishing touches on a rocking chair I had built for our future nursery. Wendy was expecting our first child, a daughter, and I wanted to create something special for her. The chair was made from cherry wood, with smooth curves and a gentle rocking motion. I had carved a small design into the headrest, a saguaro cactus to represent Arizona and our home. As I applied the final coat of finish, I thought about everything that had happened. The fear and anger I had felt when Brenda first targeted me, the stress of the legal battles, the satisfaction of winning, the growth of my business, the strengthening of our community, the new laws that would protect other homeowners. It had been a difficult journey, but it had also been transformative. I had learned that standing up for yourself matters, that community support is invaluable, and that doing things the right way, even when it is harder, pays off in the end. My daughter would grow up in a house where her father had built something meaningful, not just in terms of the workshop and the furniture, but in terms of standing up for what was right. She would grow up in a community that valued fairness and mutual support. Those were good foundations for a life. I ran my hand over the smooth arm of the rocking chair, feeling the wood that I had shaped and sanded and finished with my own hands. This was why I did this work. Not for money or recognition, but for the deep satisfaction of creating something beautiful and useful, something that would last. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across my workshop. I turned off the lights and locked the door, pausing to look at the security camera that still watched over everything. It had been months since I had even checked the footage. There were no more threats, no more harassment, no more midnight vandals. I walked across the yard to my house, where Wendy was waiting. She was sitting on the couch with her hand on her belly, feeling our daughter kick. "How is the chair coming?" she asked. "Finished. Want to see it?" "Tomorrow in the daylight. Right now, I just want you to feel this. She is really active tonight." I sat down next to Wendy and put my hand where hers had been. I felt a strong kick, then another. Our daughter already making her presence known. "She is going to be a fighter," I said. "Just like her dad. I am not a fighter. I just do not like being pushed around. Same thing sometimes." We sat together in comfortable silence, feeling our daughter move and thinking about the future. Whatever challenges came, we would face them together, with the support of our community and the knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it was hard, was always worth it. The story of my battle with Brenda and the HOA became something I occasionally told when people asked about my business, or when I spoke to aspiring entrepreneurs about navigating obstacles. But it was not the defining story of my life. It was just one chapter, one challenge overcome. The real story was the workshop I had built, the furniture I created, the students I mentored, the daughter I would raise, and the community I was part of. Those were the things that mattered in the long run. Brenda had tried to write my story for me, to force me into the role of rule breaker and troublemaker. But I had written my own story instead, one of persistence, integrity, and community. And that made all the difference.